Can you lose your US citizenship? It's a question that keeps thousands of people awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if everything they've worked for could suddenly disappear. Maybe you're a naturalized citizen who spent years navigating the complex immigration system, studying for tests, attending interviews, and finally taking that oath with your hand over your heart. Maybe you're a green card holder who dreams of becoming American someday, but you're terrified that one mistake could ruin everything. Or maybe you were born right here in the United States, but you've been hearing rumors online, seeing dramatic headlines, listening to stories from friends that make you wonder if your citizenship is truly as secure as you always believed it was. Right now, at this very moment, there are people panicking because they read something on social media that scared them. There are families afraid to travel internationally because they think leaving the country might somehow jeopardize their status. There are naturalized citizens worried that an old mistake from decades ago, something they barely remember, could come back to destroy the life they've built in America. But here's what most people don't understand, and this is exactly why I'm making this video today. The truth about losing US citizenship is both more complicated and significantly less scary than the rumors, the headlines, and the fear-mongering stories suggest. Yes, citizenship can be lost. Yes, there are specific legal pathways through which it can happen, but it's rare. It's highly specific. It follows strict legal procedures, and it almost never happens to ordinary people who are simply living honest lives, working jobs, raising families, and contributing to their communities. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how citizenship loss actually works in the real world. I'm going to explain who it affects, what the genuine risks are, what protections exist, and most importantly, what you need to know so you can stop worrying about threats that will probably never touch your life. Because fear is exhausting, uncertainty is paralyzing, and you deserve to know the facts so you can sleep peacefully at night. Welcome to Entry Status USA, your trusted source for clear, honest, straightforward information about American immigration, visas, citizenship, and everything in between. I'm here because I understand how confusing this entire system can be. I know how overwhelming the paperwork feels when you're sitting at your kitchen table with forms spread everywhere, trying to figure out which box to check. I know how exhausting the waiting becomes when you've been checking your case status online every single day for months without any update. I know how terrifying it is when you don't fully understand what's happening with your application, your status, your future. Every single day in this country, policies shift without warning. Processing times change unexpectedly. Fees increase. Forms get updated with new questions. Requirements get modified. And somewhere in America right now, there's a family sitting together trying to figure out what all of these changes mean for their dreams, their plans, their ability to stay together. Before we dive into the specific ways citizenship can be lost, and we will go through each one carefully and thoroughly, I need you to understand something fundamental about how American citizenship works. This foundation will help everything else make sense as we move forward. There are two basic pathways through which people become US citizens. The first pathway is citizenship by birth. This means you were physically born on American soil, whether that's in one of the 50 states or in certain US territories, or you were born outside the United States, but at least one of your parents was an American citizen who had the legal ability to pass citizenship to you based on specific residency requirements. The second pathway is citizenship through naturalization. This means you came to the United States as an immigrant. You lived here legally for a required number of years. You demonstrated good moral character. You passed English and civics exams. You proved your attachment to the principles of the Constitution. You took an oath of allegiance, and you earned citizenship through that entire legal process. Both groups, whether born as citizens or naturalized as citizens, are full and complete citizens with absolutely equal rights under the United States Constitution. Both groups can vote in elections, hold US passports, live anywhere in the country they choose, work in any field, serve in government positions, and enjoy every single protection that the law provides. There is no such thing as a second-class citizen based on how you obtain citizenship. But, and this is important to understand, There is one legal difference in how the government views your citizenship history, and that difference matters when we talk about the rare situations where citizenship can be questioned or lost. For people who are born as US citizens, your status is extremely secure, protected by constitutional provisions that are very difficult to challenge. In almost every situation you could possibly imagine, your citizenship cannot be taken away from you. There are no routine reviews of your behavior as an adult, no questioning of your loyalty based on where you travel or who you associate with, no investigations into your past unless something truly extraordinary and exceptionally rare occurs. And when I say rare, I mean so rare that most immigration attorneys practice their entire careers without ever seeing a single case. We'll discuss those extraordinary exceptions in detail later, but the fundamental bottom line is this. If you were born American, your citizenship is rock solid, constitutionally protected, and extraordinarily difficult to challenge or remove. For naturalized citizens, the situation is slightly different, and I want to be very clear that this doesn't mean you're less of a citizen or that your citizenship is somehow inferior or fragile. What it means is that there's a documented paper trail of your journey to citizenship. There are applications you filled out and signed, interviews you attended where you answered questions under oath, background checks that were conducted, supporting documents you provided, and official decisions that were made based on the information you presented. And if years later, sometimes even decades later, the government discovers that something critical and material in that process was intentionally hidden, deliberately falsified, or knowingly misrepresented with the intent to deceive, they have the legal authority under federal law to review your naturalization case again and potentially pursue denaturalization proceedings. But notice the words I'm using here: intentionally, deliberately, knowingly. This entire framework is not about honest mistakes. It's not about language barriers that made you misunderstand a question. It's not about confusing questions on complicated forms. It's not about minor errors or small inconsistencies that any reasonable person might make when navigating a complex bureaucratic system in a second language while stressed and nervous. The legal focus in denaturalization cases is on deliberate fraud and deception, on cases where someone actively tried to trick the system into granting citizenship to a person who clearly didn't qualify under the law. That distinction matters enormously, and it should give most people significant peace of mind. So, as we move forward through this detailed explanation, I want you to keep this framework firmly in your mind. The vast majority of US citizens, whether naturalized or born here, never face any citizenship problems at all, ever in their entire lives. The cases you occasionally hear about in news reports, the dramatic stories that circulate and get shared on social media, creating panic and fear, those cases almost always involve very serious fraud, significant criminal activity, terrorism connections, or deliberate choices that directly and clearly conflict with the oath of allegiance that someone took when they became a citizen. If you went through the immigration process honestly, if you told the truth to the best of your ability, if you provided accurate information, if you didn't try to hide major criminal history or terrorist affiliations, and if you built your American life with integrity, then the realistic chances of you ever losing your citizenship are extraordinarily vanishingly low. But understanding the rules, understanding how the system works, understanding what can trigger problems, all of that still matters tremendously because knowledge gives you confidence. And confidence helps you stop lying awake at night, worrying about threats that simply don't apply to your situation. Let's start with the most straightforward way someone can lose US citizenship. And it's also the least frightening because it's completely and totally voluntary. This process is called renunciation, and it only happens when someone actively, deliberately, and formally chooses to give up their American citizenship. You absolutely cannot lose your citizenship by accident. You can't lose it because you got angry one day and posted something critical about America on Facebook. You can't lose it because you moved to another country for work or retirement. You can't lose it because you made a negative comment about American politics at a dinner party. You can't lose it because you forgot to file your taxes one year, or because you stayed overseas longer than you originally planned. None of those things, individually or combined, cause you to lose citizenship accidentally. Renunciation is an incredibly formal, deliberate, heavily documented legal process that requires you to physically appear in person at a United States embassy or consulate located outside the United States. You cannot renounce citizenship while standing on American soil. You must schedule an appointment, meet face-to-face with a consular official, sign detailed legal paperwork that explicitly states your intent, and take an oath formally declaring that you understand exactly what you're doing, that you're doing it voluntarily without coercion, and that you understand this decision is permanent and irreversible. There's also a significant fee involved, currently over $2,000, which exists partly as a serious barrier to ensure that people truly understand the gravity and finality of what they're doing. This isn't something you can do casually or change your mind about later. Once renunciation is officially complete and processed, it cannot be undone. There's no appeals process, no takebacks, no changing your mind 6 months later when you realize what you've lost. You permanently lose your US passport. You lose the right to vote in American elections. You lose the automatic right to enter the United States. And if you ever want to visit America again in the future, even just for a vacation, you'll need to apply for a visa just like any other foreign national. And there's no guarantee that visa will be approved. Some people do choose this path, and they have various reasons. Some have permanently settled in another country, built their entire lives there, and want to simplify complex tax situations or eliminate ongoing legal obligations to the United States. Others make this choice for deeply personal, political, or identity reasons that matter to them. Whatever the individual motivation might be, the absolutely key point that you must understand is this: renunciation only happens when you specifically, explicitly request it and then complete the entire formal legal process. Simply living abroad for years doesn't trigger renunciation. Having dual citizenship doesn't trigger it. Working in another country doesn't cause it. Marrying a foreign citizen doesn't lead to it. Speaking another language at home, celebrating other cultural traditions, maintaining emotional connections to your country of origin, sending money to family overseas, none of these normal human activities cause you to accidentally lose American citizenship. You have to actively choose renunciation and complete the process, and the system is designed to make absolutely certain you understand what you're giving up before it's finalized. Now let's talk about the situation that genuinely causes the most anxiety among naturalized citizens. And this is where I want to slow down significantly and explain everything very carefully so you understand exactly what's happening, who it actually affects, and what the realistic risks are. Yes, it is legally possible for the United States government to remove citizenship in certain specific circumstances, but this process is called denaturalization. And it's critically important to understand that it doesn't apply to everyone. It doesn't happen randomly or arbitrarily. It doesn't target people for minor mistakes or honest confusion. And it follows very strict legal procedures with multiple protections built in. Denaturalization proceedings are initiated when the government discovers that someone committed serious material fraud during their naturalization process. We're talking about major intentional deception here, not small errors. Examples include things like using a completely false identity or stolen documents to apply, systematically hiding a significant violent criminal history that would have disqualified you, concealing active membership in designated terrorist organizations, lying about military service for hostile foreign governments, providing completely fabricated information about your background, your marriage, your residence, or other facts that were absolutely central to the decision to approve your citizenship application. These aren't cases where someone accidentally checked the wrong box on a form or misunderstood a confusing question during their interview. When evidence of serious fraud is discovered, whether that's months after naturalization or decades later, it doesn't get handled quietly in some back office somewhere. It becomes a formal legal case filed in federal court. The Department of Justice must file an official lawsuit. The person receives proper legal notice of the allegations against them. They have the full constitutional right to hire an attorney to represent them. They have the right to examine all evidence, to present their own evidence and witnesses, to challenge the government's claims, to cross-examine witnesses, to make legal arguments. Federal judges review everything carefully and thoroughly, looking at whether the fraud actually happened, looking at the person's intent at the time, examining whether the fraud was material, meaning it would have actually affected the approval decision if the truth had been known, and considering all relevant factors. Nothing happens overnight. These cases routinely take years to fully resolve with hearings, appeals, and multiple levels of judicial review, providing extensive due process protections. I know this entire topic sounds frightening, and I completely understand why people worry about it. The idea that something from your past could come back years later and destroy everything you've built is genuinely terrifying. But here's the crucial truth that often gets completely lost in dramatic headlines, scary social media posts, and fear-based rumors. The overwhelming majority of naturalized citizens never experience denaturalization because the overwhelming majority of people went through their immigration journey honestly and truthfully. Even if your English wasn't perfect during your citizenship interview and you struggled to understand some questions, even if you were incredibly nervous and stumbled over your answers, even if you made innocent mistakes on complicated paperwork because the forms were confusing and the instructions weren't clear, even if you got dates slightly wrong or couldn't remember every detail perfectly, those completely normal human experiences don't lead to denaturalization proceedings. The legal system is specifically looking for clear, deliberate, intentional fraud. Not confusion, not misunderstanding, not language barriers, not the normal errors that happen when regular people are trying their best to navigate an incredibly complicated bureaucratic process in what is often their second or third language while under enormous stress. Additionally, even when denaturalization cases do move forward, judges consider many factors beyond just whether fraud technically occurred. They look at how long the person has lived as a productive citizen, whether they've raised families and established deep roots in America, whether they've contributed positively to their communities, whether their children or spouse would be affected, and whether the fraud was truly material to the original decision. The system does have some flexibility and humanity built into it. Another aspect that surprises many people is that there's technically no statute of limitations for denaturalization. The government can theoretically review naturalization cases from many years ago if significant new evidence comes to light. But that absolutely does not mean that USCIS or the Department of Justice is constantly digging through old files, searching for any possible reason to strip hardworking immigrant families of their citizenship. What it actually means is that citizenship is treated by the law as something precious, meaningful, and serious, something that must be earned through honesty and truth. If you provided accurate information to the best of your knowledge and ability, if you answered questions truthfully, if you didn't try to hide serious criminal activity or terrorist connections, then you genuinely have nothing to fear from denaturalization, even if some minor detail in your file wasn't perfect. There's another category of potential citizenship loss that sometimes creates significant confusion and unnecessary panic, and it involves the associations people form and the groups they join after becoming United States citizens in very limited and specific circumstances. Citizenship can potentially be questioned if someone becomes actively involved with organizations that are openly hostile to the United States or that explicitly support violent overthrow of the American government. This is absolutely not about having political opinions, even strong controversial ones. This isn't about criticizing government policies, protesting peacefully, disagreeing sharply with elected officials, or expressing dissent. This isn't about your religion, your cultural background, your ethnicity, your national origin, or belonging to community organizations that celebrate your heritage and traditions. What actually matters in these rare cases is demonstrated intent and active alignment with groups whose stated goals explicitly and directly involve violently destroying, overthrowing, or causing serious harm to the United States government or its citizens. In the past, there have been a small number of documented cases where naturalized citizens joined designated terrorist organizations, actively worked as agents or spies for hostile foreign governments, took leadership roles in groups actively planning violent attacks against America, or engaged in similar extreme activities. When something that's serious and extreme happens, the government may initiate a review to examine whether the person's oath of allegiance, that solemn promise they made when they stood before a judge and became a citizen to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, was sincere, or whether they were already planning to work against the United States, even as they took that oath. Sometimes these reviews focus particularly on behavior that occurred shortly after naturalization because the law creates a legal presumption that actions taken very soon after becoming a citizen might reveal what the person's true intentions actually were at the exact time they applied for citizenship. But I want to slow down here and emphasize something with absolute clarity, because this is where rumors and fear really spiral out of control. These situations are extraordinarily, exceptionally rare, and they involve genuinely extreme circumstances that simply don't apply to normal people living normal lives. Living abroad for extended periods doesn't trigger this kind of review. Visiting your home country regularly doesn't cause problems. Maintaining strong cultural, family, emotional, and financial ties to where you came from doesn't put you at risk. Sending money to relatives overseas doesn't raise red flags. Having firm political views, even views that differ dramatically from mainstream American political opinion, doesn't automatically place you under suspicion or investigation. These national security-related citizenship laws exist specifically to address genuine threats to the United States. And they're applied very carefully through proper legal channels with extensive due process, not through assumptions, not through rumors, not through someone's angry social media posts. If you came to America seeking opportunity, if you worked hard to build a better life, if you followed the laws, if you took your citizenship oath with genuine sincerity, if you raised your children here, if you've contributed to your community, if you've lived your life with basic honesty and integrity, then you are absolutely not the type of person these laws are designed to target. They exist for the very rare, very serious cases involving people who obtain citizenship under completely false pretenses while secretly harboring intentions to work actively against the country. So, whenever you see dramatic headlines or hear scary stories about citizenship being revoked, take a deep breath and ask yourself whether the situation actually involved terrorism, espionage, or direct violent action against the United States. In almost every case, that critical context explains exactly why it happened. And it has absolutely nothing to do with ordinary immigrants and naturalized citizens living normal, peaceful American lives. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today on Entry Status USA. I know that immigration is stressful, confusing, emotionally draining, and often feels completely overwhelming. My goal with every single video is always to give you clear, accurate, honest information so you feel more prepared, more confident, and significantly less afraid. If this video helped you understand citizenship better, if it answered questions you've been worried about, if it gave you clarity about your own situation, or helped you stop panicking about rumors you've heard, I am truly grateful. Please subscribe to Entry Status USA so you can stay informed with the latest immigration news, policy changes, processing updates, visa information, and practical guidance for successfully navigating the U.S. immigration system. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding these important topics, whether that's family members, friends, coworkers, or people in your community. And if you have questions, experiences, or concerns you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments below, because your story and your questions might genuinely help someone else who's feeling exactly the same worries you once felt. Stay informed, stay hopeful, stay patient with yourself and the process, and always remember that knowledge truly is power in this journey.